Welcome to this explainer, where we are diving headfirst into the high-stakes, multi-layered relationship between India and Myanmar. You know, this isn't just a simple story about two neighbors. It's an incredibly complex web of superpower rivalries, massively ambitious infrastructure projects, and really fragile democratic transitions. So let's unpack the realities of this geopolitical tug-of-war.
Okay, let's just lay out the roadmap really quickly. We were going to start by looking at Myanmar as the gateway to the east. Then we'll examine the massive fallout from the 2021 military coup. After that, we'll dig into the critical infrastructure trying to connect the two nations, unpack the ever-present China factor, and finally wrap up with India's really delicate balancing act.
So diving right into part one, the gateway to the east and India's neighborhood first policy. We have to establish the status quo of Myanmar, not just as a neighbor, but as the literal, vital gateway for India's Act East policy. Think about this number for a second, 1,640. That is the exact number of kilometers Myanmar shares with India's northeastern states, places like Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, and Arunachal Pradesh. That gives this relationship immense physical weight. Basically, whatever happens in Myanmar directly bleeds over the border into India. Stability in Myanmar isn't just a foreign policy issue for New Delhi, it is absolutely crucial for domestic security. And historically, these ties have been incredibly tight. You can basically boil the traditional baseline down to the three Bs: Buddhism, business, and Burma-teak. India has actually leaned into this on a cultural level too, extending its Buddhist circuit tourism initiative into Myanmar to connect ancient heritage sites. It's all about building resonance with a Buddhist majority neighbor. So, the diplomatic relationship was really building momentum over the decades. It started way back in 1951 with the Treaty of Friendship, guided by Panchsheel, the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. Then, fast forward to the 90s, and a new policy of constructive engagement led to the 1994 Common Border Trade Agreement. By 2012, India's Prime Minister makes a historic milestone visit, solidifying military and economic ties. Things are looking up. But then, 2021 hits. A massive complication completely derails the transition, and the clock just stops.
Which brings us to part two, the 2021 military coup, where democracy was derailed. This is the inciting incident of our modern geopolitical drama. After what had been a really fragile 10-year transition toward democracy following decades of military dictatorship, Myanmar suddenly found itself right back in the grip of the generals. Here's how it went down. Ms. Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy Party won a general election by landslide. But the armed forces backed the opposition and claimed widespread fraud. The thing is, the Election Commission stated there was absolutely no evidence to support those claims. Still, right as a new session of parliament was about to open, the military seized control and declared a year-long state of emergency. Now, why does this matter so much to India? Well, the resulting multidimensional civil war has completely stalled major Indian economic and logistics projects in Southeast Asia. But the biggest alarm bell for New Delhi is the security threat. The coup seriously weakened counter-insurgency efforts. Because the Myanmar army started losing ground in India's borderlands, they actually turned around and sought help from Indian ethnic armed organizations. These are groups New Delhi views as major national security threats. And suddenly, they're partnering with the Myanmar junta. It's a massive headache. Let's move on to part three, building the connection. Because despite the chaos, there's critical physical infrastructure India is desperately trying to salvage and build. $2 billion. That's the estimated bilateral trade figure right now. It's grown, sure, but it's still at a pretty suboptimal level considering the potential. But it is a foundational number. Indian businesses are really eager to grow this by pouring investments into vital sectors in Myanmar. Think power, steel, automobiles, and textiles. And nothing illustrates the sheer scale of India's ambition quite like the Kaladan Multi-Modal Transit Transport project. Imagine this, a 539-kilometer sea route starting from Kolkata down to the Sittwe deepwater port in Myanmar. Then it transitions to a 158-kilometer river journey, and finally a highway connecting right into India's isolated northeastern states. It is an incredible triad of sea, river, and road transport. The catch? A huge chunk of it passes right through the troubled Rakhine state, which is causing severe, ongoing delays.
But it's not all just concrete and asphalt. India is heavily invested in defense and capacity building too. They run Operation Sunshine 1 and 2 to fight militants along the border, and they regularly hold joint military exercises known as IMBX. They even supplied a diesel-electric Kilo-class submarine, the INS Sindhuvir, along with Tal Chayana torpedoes. That is a massive step in defense cooperation. Plus, they're investing in people. India actually set up the Myanmar Institute of Information Technology in Mandalay, and they've trained over 200 Myanmar military officers in medical, Air Force, and Navy fields.
Okay, part 4, the China factor, because we have to talk about the third major player casting a very long shadow over the Bay of Bengal. So why is Beijing watching Myanmar so closely? Well, Myanmar sits at this highly vital geostrategic trijunction of East Asia, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. For India, a China-sponsored link between Myanmar and Bangladesh would literally bring China right to its doorstep. It creates a very real threat of complete encirclement from the east. And keep in mind, in northern Myanmar, China already has de facto control over the Kachin state, which just so happens to directly border India's Arunachal Pradesh. So what we are seeing is a stark proxy battle playing out in concrete and steel. On one hand, you have India's Sittwe port development. This is the centerpiece of India's Sagar policy, security and growth for all in the region. It's all about port-led development with a long-term goal to create a special economic zone. On the other hand, you have China's Kyaukpu port, which is intended to cement their geostrategic footprint as part of that aggressive Belt and Road Initiative momentum. Make no mistake, India's Sittwe port is designed to be a direct answer to China's moves. Which perfectly tees up part 5, the balancing act. This is the incredibly delicate, razor's edge situation Indian policymakers are trying to navigate. When you look at the matrix of issues, interests, opportunities, and risks for India, you see how tough this is. Take democratization. India wants a stable partner, obviously, but risks a massive backlash if they push too hard. For the Northeast, their interest is ensuring there's no safe haven for guerrilla groups, but the constant risk is being ambushed. And when it comes to China, India absolutely wants to avoid a zero-sum game, but they risk falling permanently behind if China's momentum forces them out of the picture. It is quite literally a razor-thin line to walk. And as if the geopolitical chess match wasn't hard enough, add in the reality of a porous land border and maritime boundary. India is struggling with severe transnational issues here. Because Myanmar is part of the infamous Golden Triangle, drug trafficking is a huge problem, right alongside the smuggling of light arms and counterfeit currency. There are also safe havens for Naga insurgents. Plus, the Indian government is dealing with an estimated 40,000 Rohingya immigrants currently staying illegally in India. Navigating the negotiations on their deportation is a major ongoing point of contention. So what is the actual game plan moving forward for the ACTI's policy? There are a few concrete steps. Number 1, implementing the Kofi Annan Advisory Commission recommendations to manage the Rohingya refugee crisis and improve the socioeconomic conditions over in the Rakhine state. 2, formalizing trade with single window clearances. A big part of this is utilizing border HOTS, local border markets, to really energize the exchange of local product. 3, promoting people-to-people connectivity through things like cross-border bus services. And finally, boosting cross-border trade in high-value services like medicine, diagnostics, and education. At the end of the day, it all comes down to this defining objective: building an economic and security relationship that prevents Myanmar from slipping into the orbit of China while simultaneously supporting its transition into a full-fledged federal democracy. Ultimately, can India successfully maintain this geopolitical tug-of-war to secure its eastern gateway, keep insurgencies at bay, and manage an incredibly complex neighbor? Or will the momentum of competing superpowers just prove to be too strong? That is the billion-dollar question for the future of South Asia. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.